Namaste. Welcome you again. Shriyam chadadyat bhavatam purarihi yadangatejah prasare bhavanim virajate nirmala chandrikayam mahaushati vajjalita himadram. This is the second part of my presentation on inductively coupled plasma spectroscopy. In the first part, I explained you what is meant by the word plasma, how plasma is made to develop or how it is induced in argon gas with the help of varying electromagnetic field and also with the help of collision of accelerated electrons. After that, I described about various types of spectroscopy that are working in association with inductively coupled plasma. I mentioned you the advantages of ICP-MS, that is inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. Today, we will understand more about ICP-MS. An ICP-MS combines a high temperature ICP, that is a high temperature inductively coupled plasma. I told you in the last presentation that about 10,000 degree Kelvin of temperature is generated here. So this ICP is coupled here as a source for mass spectrometer. The ICP source converts the atoms of the elements in the sample to ions. These ions are then separated and detected by the mass spectrometer. Carefully observe this figure. This is the picture of an ICP torch. I mentioned you in the first part that ICP torch contains 3 concentric tubes. Outer 2 tubes are made up of quartz and the innermost is mostly made up of sapphire. And I have also mentioned that one end of it is located in the rapidly changing electromagnetic field or RF environment. By subjecting argon gas to a small spark for a short period, electrons are generated. Let me try to elaborate this ICP torch more here. Argon gas flows inside the concentric channels of this ICP torch. So this is the ICP torch. Here you can see this is the schematic diagram and that is enlarged here. As the argon gas flows inside the concentric channels, the RF load coil is connected to a radio frequency generator. Here we have RF load coil. As the power is supplied to this load coil from a generator, oscillating electric and magnetic fields are established at the end of the torch. When a spark is applied to the argon flowing through the ICP torch, electrons are stripped off of the argon atoms, forming argon ions. These ions are caught in the oscillating field and collide with other argon atoms, forming an argon discharge, or in other words, plasma. So here you will find argon plasma. So these are the atoms. So this is the center of the tube where the aerosol of the sample is thrown up. And here we have the ions that are generated from these atoms. These atoms, when they reach to the end of the tube where there is a rapidly changing magnetic field, the electrons are stripped off and the ions are generated. Because of this, argon plasma is induced. The sample is typically introduced into the ICP plasma as an aerosol, either by aspirating a liquid or dissolved solid sample into a nebulizer, or using a laser to directly convert the solid samples into an aerosol. So both are possible. Either you will have to suspend your solid particle in a solvent, or you have to dissolve whenever possible your solid sample in a solvent to make a solution, or your sample may be a liquid itself. In such situation, this liquid can be directly aspirated into a nebulizer, or if it is a solid sample which is not dissolved in any solvent, you can directly convert into an aerosol with the help of a laser. So once the sample aerosol is introduced into the ICP torch, it is completely desolvated, and the elements in the aerosol are converted first into gaseous atoms and then ionized towards the end of the plasma. So in one end of the tube, the aerosol is introduced. As you can see in this picture, in this end, aerosol is introduced. On the other end, we have plasma. Once the fine droplets of the sample are introduced into the ICP torch, it completely gets dissolved, and the elements in the aerosol, they are converted first into gaseous form, and then these atoms are ionized when they reach to the other end where there is plasma. So most important things that are to be remembered about the argon ICP plasma are the argon discharge with a temperature of about 6,000 to 10,000 degree Kelvin is an excellent ion source. The ion formed by the ICP discharge are typically positive ions. This is something that we have to keep in your mind. The ions that are formed by the ICP discharge are typically positive, M plus or M plus 2. Therefore, elements that prefer to form negative ions like chlorides, iodides, fluorides, they are very difficult to determine via ICP-MS. This is the limitation that you have to keep in your mind. The detection capabilities of the technique can vary with the sample introduction technique that is used, because different techniques will allow different amounts of the sample to reach the ICP plasma. Detection capabilities will vary with the sample matrix also, which may affect the degree of ionization that will occur in the plasma or allow the formation of a species that may interfere with the analyte determination. Once the elements in the sample are converted into ions, they are then brought into the mass spectrometer. Now the first part has already worked. So in the first part, that is a part of inductively coupled plasma. So you have converted the sample into aerosols, you have introduced it into the tube, and in the tube it got converted into gas and then into the ions. So when they reach to the plasma on the other end, ions are properly formed. And these formed ions are then brought into the mass spectrometer via interface cones. So this is the interface region. The interface region in the ICP-MS instrument transmits the ions traveling in the argon sample stream at atmospheric pressure, that is 1 to 2 torr, into the low pressure region of the mass spectrometer, that is too low, less than 1 into 10 to the power minus 5 torr. Suddenly the pressure is dropped here. as the argon passes with the sample in the ion form, it will be at atmospheric pressure. With the help of these cones, the pressure is reduced drastically to 1 into 10 to the power minus 5 torr. So this is done through the intermediate vacuum region. Here you can see this is the vacuum region intermediately. And it is created by two interface cones. You are seeing two interface cones here, the sampler cone, the skimmer cone. In between this sampler and skimmer cones, we have vacuum which helps the pressure to drop suddenly. The ions from the ICP source are then focused by the electrostatic lenses in the system. In the system, we have electrostatic lenses. As the sample in the form of ions passes through the cones, they will enter and they will be focused in the MS into the electrostatic lenses. The ions coming from the system, as I already mentioned, are positively charged. So this electrostatic lens, which also has a positive charge, serves to collimate the ion beam and focus it into the entrance aperture or a slit of the mass spectrometer. On either side, we have this electrostatic lens. As the ions pass, they are deflected by this electrostatic lens because it is also having positive charge. From either side, when these ions of the sample are deflected, naturally that will form a narrow beam at the center so that it can focus to the small aperture or slit of the mass spectrometer. The sampler and skimmer cones are metal discs with small holes. So these two sets of cones that you are seeing here, they are made up of metals and they are in the form of discs with a small hole, say about 1 millimeter in the center. The purpose of these cones is to sample the center portion of the ion beam coming from the ICP torch. So only the center portion of the ion beam is sampled here. And this is very important so that concentrated amount of ions enter mass spectrometer. There is a shadow stop here. You can see this is shadow stop. This shadow stop or some similar device blocks the photons coming from the ICP torch, which is also an intense light source. Along with the ions of the sample coming with argon gas, you will also see that there are some photons that are generated during the process due to the action of plasma. They are also coming with the sample ions and they will disturb the reading. So such photons are blocked here by this shadow stop. Due to the small diameter of the orifices in the sampler and skimmer cone, ICP-MS has some limitations as to the amount of total dissolved solids in the sample. Because some amount of the sample is not allowed to pass through. Only selected amount of the sample is allowed to pass through the small aperture. So there are some limitations as to the amount of total dissolved solids to be analyzed in the MS. Generally, it is recommended that samples have no more than 0.2% total dissolved solids for the best instrument performance and stability. This is something that you have to remember. If the sample is highly concentrated one, then it will affect the stability of the instrument. You should see that sample concentration is not more than 0.2% in terms of total dissolved solids. If samples with very high total dissolved solid levels are run, the orifices in the cones will eventually become blocked. Due to this, sensitivity will decrease and detection capability will reduce, and this requires the system to be shut down for maintenance. So this is why many sample types, say soil or rack samples that are digested and used, must be diluted sufficiently before running on the ICP-MS. So this is something that we have to keep in your mind. Now let us talk about the lens system here. Different types of ICP-MS systems have different types of lens systems. The simplest type of instrument employs a single lens, while more complex systems may even contain up to 12 ion lenses. Each ion optic system is specifically designed to work with the interface and mass spectrometer design of the instrument. Just observe this diagram, figure 3. Once the ions enter the mass spectrometer, they are separated by the mass to charge ratio. That is how any mass spectrometer works. The most commonly used type of mass spectrometer is quadrupole mass filter. This is the schematic presentation of quadrupole mass filter. In this type, there will be 4 rods approximately 1 centimeter in diameter and about 15 to 20 centimeter long. They are arranged in this fashion, as you can see in this figure. In a quadrupole mass filter, alternating AC and DC current are applied. AC and DC voltages are applied to opposite pairs of the rods. You have seen in the diagram that there are 4 rods, 2 pairs each arranged side by side. To one pair AC, to another pair DC. Like that, alternating AC and DC voltages are applied to opposite pairs of the rods. So these voltages are then rapidly switched along with an RF field. The resulting effect is that it will act like an electrostatic filter. An electrostatic filter is established that only allows the ions of a single mass to charge ratio pass through the rods to the detector at a given instant in time. In one fraction of second, or say in 1 second, only one mass to charge ratio is allowed to pass. In the next instant, next mass to charge ratio is allowed to pass. That means it is acting like a filter. It is not a physical filter otherwise. It is an electrostatic filter. So the quadrupole mass filter is really a sequential filter. Whenever you have multiple ions together, it is allowing one by one, ions one by one to pass through. That means these are separated. Based on the mass to charge ratio, one ion is allowed in a given time, then the next, like that. So this is a sequential filter with the settings being settings being changed for each specific mass per charge or mass per electric at a time. However, the voltages on the rods can be switched at a very rapid rate. The result is that the quadrupole mass filter can separate up to 2,400 atomic mass units per second. So you can imagine in a second, within a second, it can separate 2400 ions and allow them to pass one by one. This speed is why the quadruple ICP-MS is often considered to have simultaneous multi-elemental analysis properties. It looks as if simultaneously it is analyzing so many elements. Actually, it is not simultaneous, but within a fraction of a second, one element is separated from the other. The ability to filter ions on their mass to charge ratio allows ICP-MS to supply isotopic information, since different isotopes of the same element have different masses. So that is what happens in isotope, isn't it? Number of protons, number of electrons will be same, but number of neutrons will be different. The charge will be the same, but mass will be different. As MS works based on mass to charge ratio, charge may be same, but mass changes. That is why different isotopes could be separated here. Typical quadrupole mass spectrometers used in ICP-MS, they have a resolution between 0.7 to 1 AMU. So this is sufficient for most routine applications. Now let us talk about advanced type of mass spectrometer, that is HR, or high resolution or magnetic sector mass spectrometers. The use of high resolution or magnetic sector mass spectrometers has become more common in ICP-MS, allowing the user to eliminate or reduce the effect of interferences during the mass overlap. If at all, the differences in the mass is very, very low, very, very less. In such situation, there is a possibility that interferences may occur because of mass overlap. So such problems will be eliminated when we use HR, or high resolution type of mass spectrometers. The resolution of high resolution instruments can be changed by adjusting the width of the entrance and exit slit of the spectrometer. You can change the width of the entrance slit and exit slit. Accordingly, the resolution can be changed. A typical HRICP-MS instrument has a resolving power up to 10,000, and it's typically operated at preset resolution settings for low, medium, or high resolution. You can set the instrument for low, medium, or high resolution to make the operation easier for the user. But this type of instrument has some limitations. High resolution instruments are typically expensive, 2 to 3 times costlier than a regular quadrupole ICP-MS instrument. And they are also more complex to operate and maintain. And in addition, for every 10-fold increase in resolving power, there is a concomitant decrease in the signal intensity. That is a problem. So because of this, actual detection capabilities may be limited if the concentration of the analyte of interest is very, very low. Finally, they are much slower than a quadrupole system. So that is a major problem. So due to the longer settling time required by the magnet, when the voltages are adjusted for large mass jumps, HRICP-MS instruments typically are 4 to 5 times slower than a quadrupole instrument. So this makes them unsuitable for a rapid, high throughput multi-elemental analysis that are routine in production type laboratories. If it is a production lab laboratories where you will have to separate the elements, and these elements are used for manufacturing. If that is the purpose, we require the analysis to occur very quickly. If it is only a research purpose, in such situation, you can wait for more sensitive analysis. So we require a high throughput, quick, multi-elemental analysis for production type of laboratories where HRICP-MS is not suitable, quadrupole type of instrument is preferred. And these are also not the instrument of choice for transient signal analysis, including those obtained using laser ablation techniques for elemental profiling or chromatographic separations, because their scan speed are too low to look at more than 1 to 3 elements of similar mass in an analysis. So in such situations where you are using laser ablation technique for elemental profiling or maybe for chromatographic separation, this slower scanning speed will slow down the entire analysis. So as a result, this type of instrument is generally found in research institutions, not in production laboratories. So in research institutions and in laboratories with highly specialized needs for a low number of samples, HRICP-MS is used. Otherwise, regular quadrupole ICP-MS is found. We have another specialized ICP-MS which I mentioned you in the types of spectrophotometers or spectrometers, that is MC-ICP-MS. So that is mainly used with multiple detectors. That is why it is called as MC, multi-collector. This can also be called as multi-collector HRICP-MS or multi-collector ICP-MS. So these instruments are generally designed and developed for the purpose of performing high precision isotope ratio analysis. This is also having a specialized application only. For example, you have Gandhaka, which is in the form of isotopes. We have Parada, mercury, that also shows multiple isotopes. If you want to work on an advanced study of different isotopic information of these elements, then you can use this multi-collector type of ICP-MS. Since an array of 5 to 10 detectors can be positioned around the exit slit, and it's not the one detector, there will be multiple detectors. 5 to 10 detectors can be positioned around the exit slit of a double focusing system. The isotopes of a single element can generally all be determined simultaneously. That is why this technique is of highest precision. This also has disadvantages. Here, isotopes must all be in a narrow range mass, plus or minus 15 to 20% of the nominal mass. If mass of one element of an isotope is 18 and the other is 26, then it becomes difficult. If they are very close, in most of the occasions they are very close, where the change in the mass between the isotopes may be plus or minus 15 to 20%. In such situation only this will work, because magnetic sector settings, they are remained fixed, while only the electric sector settings can be changed or scanned. So this generally means that each elemental isotopic system must be measured in a separate analysis. So this type of instrument is generally not suitable for routine multi-elemental analysis for major and minor constituents, and is typically only used for performing isotope ratio measurement. Once the ions have been separated by their mass to charge ratio, they must be then detected or counted by using a suitable detector. Why this detector is used? The main purpose of the detector is to translate the number of ions striking the detector into an electric signal, because transduction is a required part in almost all the instrumental methods of analysis. The signal that is generated may not be readable always. It may have to be converted into another type of signal. Here, as the ion strikes the detector, it is converted or translated into an electric signal that can be measured and related to the number of atoms of that element in the sample via the use of calibration standards. Most detectors use a high negative voltage on the front surface of the detector to attract the positively charged ions to the detector. I already mentioned you that here it is the positively charged ions that are detected, and it is not suitable for negatively charged ions like a chloride, iodide, etc. So once the ion hits the active surface of the detector, a number of electrons are released, which then strike the next surface of the detector, amplifying the signal. A few things that are to be remembered about these ICP-MS detectors. It is a consumable item. It's not a permanent one. After analyzing some samples, you will have to change the detector. It is a consumable item. As ions hit the surface of the detector and are converted to electrons, the active film coating will be consumed. Depending on usage, a typical discrete dynode detector that we use will last 6 to 18 months in a regularly used quadrupole ICP-MS. If you are using it more frequently, it may last only for 6 months. If less frequently, it may come to 18 months. It should be protected from high signal count rates. So many of the manufacturers have designed the detector in such a way that its circuit may break when there will be high flow of signal count rate. Otherwise, it may prove fatal to the detector. However, the users can further do this by diluting the sample. I already mentioned you. When the sample is of high concentration, you just dilute it more and more, and then you use it. And also use a good lens system so that the isotopes or any other ions that are reaching are not much abundant. They are less abundant. And these detectors are expensive also. So you have to take all the care to protect them. Once you purchase the detector, you keep it in such a place that it is not affected by the light, because they are light sensitive. Most of the detectors are as sensitive to photons as they are to ions. So care should be taken to store spare detectors in the dark and never expose these detectors to the light while in high voltage situation or high voltage supply. They may be affected. Here you can see the picture very carefully. You can see the different colors, different squares of different colors. This figure shows the elements traditionally determined by ICP-MS and their approximate instrumental detection limits. So you should understand that instrumentation detection limit is calculated as 3 times the standard deviation of a blank measurement and represent the best possible detection capability of the instrument. Here you can see the blue one shows 0.1 to 1 parts per trillion. Yellow is 1 to 10 parts per trillion, and blue is less than 0.1 parts per trillion. And this orange one 10 to 100 parts per trillion. Pink one is 0.1 to 1 parts per billion, and green one is 1 to 10 parts per billion. So you can see that the blue one here, maybe silver, rhodium, molybdenum, zirconium, yttrium, cesium, barium, gold, all this can be determined at a very, very, very low level, 0.1 parts per trillion also. The yellow one including mercury, cadmium, copper, zinc, cobalt, iron, manganese, etc. 1 to 10 parts per trillion. The orange one here, potassium and calcium, can be detected up to 10 to 100 parts per trillion. The pink one here, like boron, silicon, phosphorus, etc., can be determined up to level of 0.1 to 1 parts billion. That is the detection limit of this particular instrument. In real life, the method detection limit, or MDL, which is also called as practical quantitation limit, or PQL, will generally be 2 to 10 times higher than IDL. So instrumental detection limit is different than the practical one. So this will depend upon many factors that may include lab and instrument background levels, sample matrix, sample collection and preparation methods, operator skill level, etc. However, the instrumentation detection limit can be used as a general guide as to the relative capabilities of the ICP-MS technique as compared to other analytical techniques. Now let us see a couple of Ayurvedic examples. So this is an article published by Ashwini A and others. Estimation of heavy and trace elements in Ayurvedic drug Loha Bhasma. Alternative medicine for anemia by AAS and ICP-OES. Here it is ICP-OES that is followed, where they detected arsenic, cadmium, mercury, sodium, phosphorus, lead, tin, fluorine, chlorine, etc. So this is another work where blood gold concentration versus time profile can be observed, where when Swarna Bhasma was administered sublingually alone, or Swarna Bhasma with black pepper and Swarna Bhasma with black pepper and ghee. So here the bioavailability is studied, where they have used the technique of ICP. This is by Patel, Bholeti and others. They said that sublingual administration of Swarna Bhasma in the dose of 30 milligram proved to show maximum absorption based on ICP technique. This is another article, determination of trace elements in commonly consumed medicinal herbs by ICP-MS and multivariate analysis. In this article, you will see that various plants have shown different quantities of metals in them, like manganese, iron, cobalt, nickel, copper, zinc, lead, etc. So that's all in this presentation. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for this opportunity. In the next class, we'll come up with some more new topics. Till then, Sarve Santu Niramayaha.